crying sometimes, angry, frightened. There had even been one moment when Rena had overheard one of the mothers, Alicia, say to her youngest child, Bixi, "You better stop crying right now, young lady, or I am going to go get Rena." What was that supposed to mean, Rena had wondered. Was she the enforcer of discipline now? The designated spanker? No, she had realized. She had become the father. They had lost all of their men to the Formics, and now, without any of the women and children consciously making the decision, they had chosen Rena to fill that void. There were times when she wanted to scream at them all, "I am not in charge. Do not come to me with your problems. Solve them yourselves or go to the captain. I don't really care." But that wasn't true exactly. She did care. The children, wild and obnoxious as they were just children after all. Children who had each suffered a great loss. It broke Rena's heart to think of it. She had known each of their fathers. She had seen them interact with each and every child, playing together, laughing together, flying around the cargo bay together. They were moments that could never be repeated. And for the younger children, they were moments that would soon be forgotten. It struck Rena as the greatest injustice of the universe. These little minds, who so desperately needed to remember their fathers, would almost certainly forget them with time. She finished the report 3 hours later and sent it immediately via laser line to the nearest trade station on the asteroid Themis. In the past few weeks, the interference had slowly dissipated, and communication across distances was gradually coming back online. Themis wasn't that far away, and Rena was confident the salvage traders there would spark to something on her list. Rena watched the screen, waiting for the alert that would tell her the transmission had been received. She must have fallen asleep at some point, because the next thing she knew, the screen chimed and she jerked awake. There was a message from Themis. "Transmission received. Have forwarded to salvage buyers. Note, news feeds back online. Info on war. Subscriptions are 100 credits a week." The words of the second line stopped Rena cold. There was a massive laser line receiver on Themis, and apparently they were getting feeds relayed to them from Earth again. She wrote back immediately. "Can you do a search in the news feeds? I am looking for information on my son, Victor Delgado. He flew from the K-Belt to Luna in a quick ship to warn Earth of approaching Formics. Ship of origin was El Cavador. Any information is appreciated." It was an hour before she received a reply. 100 credits to search the feeds." She almost smacked the screen. They wanted to charge her to do a simple search? A task that would take them only a few minutes? A child could do it. She could get a subscription for a week and do the search herself for that price. Didn't they read her message? Victor had gone to warn Earth. Didn't that mean anything to them? No, of course it didn't. They were on Themis, a rock of money grubbers if ever there was one. She pushed herself away from the terminal and flew immediately to Arjuna's cabin. It was several hours before the end of sleep shift, but she knocked on the door anyway. When no one answered, she knocked again. She heard movement inside, and a moment later the door opened. Sabad, one of Arjuna's wives, squinted at the light. Rena sighed inside. Of Arjuna's 3 wives, Sabad was the only one with whom Rena did not get along. The girl was young, barely over 20, and she had not yet borne Arjuna any children. Before Rena and the others from El Cavador had come aboard, Arjuna's 3 wives had each enjoyed their own room. But everyone had to sleep somewhere, and sacrifices had been made when the ship's crew had doubled in size. Now, all of Arjuna's wives shared the same room, and Sabad seemed to hold Rena personally responsible for the inconvenience. Do you have any idea what time it is? Sabad said, hovering in the door frame, giving Rena a look that would wilt flowers. I need to speak to Arjuna, said Rena. It can wait until morning, whatever it is. No, it can't. We just received a laser line from Themis. They're getting news feeds from Earth again. Good for them. You can tell my husband in the morning. He's not just your husband, Rena wanted to say. He's Ubax's husband, and Kaaha's husband too. 2 of the other Somali women on board. You should use the plural possessive pronoun Sabad and say our. But Rena was not one to be petty. Not out loud, at least. So she simply said, I apologize for the interruption, Sabad, but I think Arjuna would want to know this immediately. Do you claim to know the mind of my husband better than I do? Of course not. Then go back to your little hive of spoiled children and leave us alone. She began to close the door, but Rena stopped it with her hand. Normally, Rena was mild-mannered and slow to rile, but Sabad was pushing the wrong buttons. The children from El Cavador were anything but spoiled. Those who were old enough to work did more on the ship in an hour than Sabad did in a day. Rena was just about to say as much when Arjuna appeared in the doorway. He was shirtless, and his black skin was almost invisible in the darkness. What is it, Rena? His voice was deep and froggy from sleep. She told him about the laser line from Themis. Arjuna considered a moment, then pulled himself out into the corridor and turned back to Sabad. Go back to bed, Sabad. I will be there in a moment. Sabad folded her arms. Whatever you have to say to her, I can hear it too. I said, go back to bed, woman. There was a bite in his tone, and Sabad relented. She gave Rena a final withering look, then slammed the door in her face. She doesn't like me very much, said Rena. No, she doesn't. She thinks you're competition. Competition for what? My affection. Rena felt her cheeks flush. Arjuna laughed softly. Do not look embarrassed, Lady of El Cavador. I am not proposing marriage. I am telling you how a young woman's mind works. She has given me no children. She worries I will tire of her and turn to another. You do turn to another. Frequently. You have 2 other wives. I never know who I'm going to find in your room when I knock. Arjuna shrugged. It is hard to keep a schedule. I let the wives decide. There are many nights when none of them come to me. I can't say I blame them. It was much easier before you came. Each of the wives had her own room. I went to them. Now, they share a room. The gods only know what they talk about. Rena felt embarrassed. She had only thought of the inconvenience she and the family had been to the wives. She hadn't given much consideration to what it might mean to Arjuna. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean for us to cause marital strife. Arjuna brushed the words away. You have turned this ship into a moneymaker. That's what matters. This could be our biggest haul yet. All because of you. It was true. A week ago, they had come upon a derelict juke vessel that appeared to be picked clean by vultures, which were aggressive salvagers who were little more than pirates. Arjuna was ready to dismiss the ship, but Rena had encouraged him to investigate it nonetheless. Vultures often ignore the smaller parts in their rush to gut the ship, Rena had said. Half the time, they don't know what they're looking for. It won't hurt to look a little closer. It hadn't hurt. They had found the drive system mostly intact, and the oxygen generator had needed only minor repairs. Those 2 parts alone should earn them more than all of their other salvages combined. We can't afford a subscription, said Arjuna. 100 credits a week is ridiculous. No salvage ship can afford that. We barely make enough to eat. They don't expect us to pay 100 a week. They expect us to talk down the price,
To how much?
Half that. Maybe as low as 40.
Which we still can't afford. And Earth is a long way away. What good would the news do us here?
It's Earth, said Rena. It's our home.
Is it? When was the last time you were on Earth? 20 years ago?
Unless the Formics are defeated, we are cut off, Arjuna. No supply lines will get through. We will die out here.
I am aware of this. But our tracking the news feeds won't prevent that from happening. We are powerless to help Rena. The Formics will win or lose regardless of us.
He crossed his arms and studied her a moment.
Are you sure this is not about Victor? I know you want closure, Rena. I understand that.
Not closure. That suggests he didn't make it to Luna. I'm certain he did.
You say that, but I see the doubt in your eyes.
He sighed softly.
He tried to cross the system in a quick ship, Rena. This is impossible. There is no chance your son is still alive.
Don't talk to me about chances. You do not know my son. He held up his hands.
I have offended you. That was not my intent.
Rena ran a hand through her hair, calming herself. This is not just about Victor. There are other advantages here. With a subscription, we would have a continuous link to Themis's receiver. We'd be in the network. We'd get news from distant places in the belt. We could better track vultures.
These are all wonderful benefits, Rena. But we can't afford it. We are a salvage ship.
What if we weren't? Her question confused him.
What are you saying?
What if we made this a mining ship? He laughed.
The Gagak is no mining ship. We're barely a salvage ship.
What difference does that make? El Cavador was in no better condition when we started. His smile faded.
You're serious about this?
If we're mining rock, we'll make far more money. The thought hadn't occurred to me until now, but it makes complete sense. We can help each other. The women and I want our own ship. The faster we bring in revenue, the faster we can make that possible.
Consider what you're saying, Rena. We don't have the equipment. We would need smelters, diggers, quick ships. We don't have any of that.
So we get it. Piece by piece. We're salvagers. We find what we need, or we trade for it. We've got some of that stuff in our haul right now. Not much, but enough to get started. He shook his head.
We don't have a credit rating, Rena. Even if we could dig, Luna would never take anything we send them.
You don't have a credit rating, but El Cavador does. I propose a partnership. Your ship and your crew, plus my crew, our expertise, and our credit rating. We split the profits. It's not as far-fetched as it sounds. He looked uncomfortable.
No, I am sorry. A partnership is out of the question.
You can't do this without us, Arjuna. We know the business. We know the tech. We have the credentials. It's only fair that you make us full partners.
I agree. That is only fair. But I cannot partner with you, Rena. It's not possible.
Why not? He hesitated.
Because you are women.
His words surprised her so much that it took a moment for their full meaning to sink in. Of course, she thought. He was Somali, a patriarchal society. He would lose face with his crew if he partnered with women. They would think him weak, soft, unmanly. He would lose command, maybe even his wives. A stronger man would step in and claim them, and Rena and the others would be pushed aside.
You must understand, he said. It is nothing against you personally. This is simply who we are. You have your culture, and we have ours. I cannot ignore that for convenience.
No, you can't. The partnership wouldn't last. We would be ostracized. And so would you.
There is one possible solution, he said. But I do not think you will like it.
She looked at him and waited.
What you are proposing is a merger of tribes, Rena. This happens all the time in my country. It is done through a marriage.
She blinked. Marriage?
If I marry all 19 of you, then you would be one with our tribe. My crew would agree to a business partnership. You would not be equal in station to my current wives, however. They are of my tribe by birth. You are not. You would be considered my concubines.
Rena smiled, and it took everything she possessed not to start laughing. Arjuna, I am flattered that you would so willingly take us on as your concubines. But we cannot marry you.
Then this conversation is at a close. I cannot enter a partnership with women who are not my wives. There would be mutiny.
Rena considered this, then said, Why don't we say that our husbands are away? We have never recovered their bodies, and in our tribe, women can speak for the family in their husband's absence. Ours would be a merger of tribes that recognizes our husbands in absentia. He shook his head.
My crew knows that your husbands have died, Rena. You have discussed their deaths with some of them. It doesn't matter that we have not seen their bodies. We have seen your grieving faces, and that is worse.
What about the boys? Franco is 12. That's Bella's son. He is the oldest male. We could say he is the leader of our tribe, and this merger is his wish. Arjuna shook his head.
He is not man-grown. He cannot speak for the tribe.
Then what about Victor? My son. He is a man grown. If I can prove that he's alive, he would be the head of our tribe, would he not? He would speak for us. He could approve this merger. Arjuna frowned.
Why do I feel like I've just been painted into a corner? Do you lay all of your snares so delicately, Lady of El Cavador?
You can't keep calling me that, said Rena. I am not the only lady from that ship.
No, but you are the most regal of your tribe, the most worthy of that title.
I didn't lay a snare. It just worked out that way.
That's what every fox would say.
She smiled. In my tribe, to call a woman a fox is to call her beautiful.
You are certainly that, lady. But in my tribe, a fox has a different meaning altogether.
So, are we in agreement? He gestured toward the helm.
Come, let us see if the chief of your tribe still lives.
Chapter 13. India. Mazer was running on a treadmill in a government safe house in New Delhi when the call finally came. He looked at his beeping wristpad, saw that it was Wit, and stepped off the treadmill to answer it. "Where are you?" asked Wit. "Exercise room. Trying to keep from dying of boredom. Please tell me we can leave this building and be useful again." It was their 10th day in India. After a rocky entrance into the country during which the Indian Air Force had threatened to shoot them down and fired a volley of warning shots, Wit had gotten on the radio and secured them a military escort to New Delhi. A decontamination crew had met them at the airport, and once Mazer, Wit, and Shenzhou were clear of their biosuits, the military had taken them directly to the safe house, where they had remained under house arrest without any contact with the outside world. "Shower and meet me and Shenzhou in the lobby in 10 minutes, said Wit. "A car will take us to Gadhavi's labs. He believes he has the answer." The goo guns they had brought from China had been confiscated the moment Mazer had landed in New Delhi. Dr. Gadhavi and his team had supposedly been hard at work on a counteragent ever since. Mazer jogged back to his room and hit the shower. He met Witt and Shenzhou in the lobby a few minutes later. A car and 2 junior officers of the Indian Army were waiting outside. The officers sat in the front and drove them north of the city to a large government compound surrounded by military checkpoints. The driver weaved through the campus until he parked at the curb of a white office building. A decorated officer of the Indian military in his mid-50s met them at the curb. He smiled wide when Witt stepped from the vehicle. The 2 men embraced, and then Witt turned to the others. "Captain Rackham, Captain Shenzhou, I present a dear friend of mine, Major Kudabadi Ketkar of the Indian Para-Commandos. His men trained with the MOPS before the invasion." Ketkar smiled good-naturedly and shook everyone's hands. "What Captain O'Toole means is that his MOPS ran circles around our PCs, like a cat playing with a blind 3-legged mouse. He even had the gall to kill me once during a mock battle, in my own office. I'm still assembling the shattered pieces of my pride." He laughed, winked at Witt, then gestured to the main entrance. "But come, they are waiting for us." He led them inside to a security checkpoint, where a woman gave them each a visitor's badge. A large brass seal hung on the wall behind her. It featured a Bengal tiger standing on an outcropping of rock above a cluster of lotus flowers. It bore the words, "National Biodefense Agency." There was more written at the bottom in Devanagari script, but Mazer had no idea what it said. Ketkar escorted them deeper into the building, passing through a wide atrium. There was an air of opulence to the place, not flagrantly so, but it was certainly not the bland utilitarian decor Mazer had come to expect from government agencies. Marble floors, palm trees, a fountain. It felt more like a luxurious hotel. They went through another door, and then they were outside again, this time in a beautifully landscaped plaza in the center of the building. Benches, flowers, pathways, small fruit trees. Ketkar stopped and faced them. "Before we go down, I wanted to take a moment to apologize on behalf of my government for keeping you confined to the safe house since your arrival. I've been ordered to tell you that we did so solely for your own protection, but you're all too smart to believe that. This is a delicate political situation, gentlemen, as you can imagine, and my superiors are taking extreme precautions. No one was quite certain what to do with you, so they kept you locked down while they argued the matter." "What's to argue?" asked Shenzhou. "We came here for help." "Yes, but you didn't come here on behalf of the Chinese government. This was not a sanctioned mission. You came here as 3 rogue soldiers. That made a few members of our National Security Council uneasy. Our relations with China are tense as it is. Many feared how China would respond if we helped you." "If the counteragent works," said Shenzhou, "China will take it gladly." "Yes," said Ketkar, "but we're not convinced that giving the counteragent to the Chinese military is the best course of action." Shenzhou couldn't hide his surprise. "What are you saying? You will let China burn? You will stand by while millions more die?" "You misunderstand me, Captain. India wants to help, and will help. But handing over the counteragent to your military will not necessarily produce the best results. Your army is exhausted and spread too thin. You've lost your best field commanders, and you have pockets of survivors regrouping into units without any clear command structure. You're fragmented and disorganized, Captain. We're not certain China can get the job done." "You don't mince words," said Shenzhou. "This is war, Captain, not a dinner party. India cannot allow the Formics to reach our borders. We must do everything in our power to stop them now, in China. Dropping off barrels of the counteragent at the Chinese border won't cut it." "What are you proposing?" asked Witt. "Troops?" "Essentially," said Ketkar. "The President wants to broker a deal with the Chinese in which we offer the counteragent if they agree to allow Indian PCs into China to help administer it. That's why I'm involved in all of this." "The PCs are certainly capable," said Witt. "Yes, but the Chinese have been vehemently resistant to outside troops," said Mazer, "especially from India and Russia. It's not like India is an ally. Are you sure China will agree to this?" "They don't have a choice," said Ketkar. "They're lost without the counteragent. The entire southeast coast has fallen from Hong Kong to Shanghai. Their economy is in ashes." "Even so," said Mazer, What if China refuses? India can't hold the counter-agent hostage. China would go public. They'd say you have the solution but aren't sharing it. They'd say you were letting their people die. They'd paint you as heartless bastards. The world would despise you overnight. China would then put so much international pressure on you, you would be forced to give it to them anyway. It won't come to that, said Ketkar. Captain Shenzhou here will see to it that China approves. Shenzhou laughed. Whoever told you I have a position of influence is sadly misinformed, Major. I am no one, a lowly captain. Nothing I say to the CMC or Politburo holds any weight whatsoever. I doubt I could even get a message through the people who filtered their communications. You underestimate yourself, said Ketkar. And it's not the CMC or Politburo you'd be addressing. It's the people of China and the rest of the world. What do you have in mind? Asked Mazer. A press conference. A demonstration of the counter-agent, said Ketkar. We'd have every major news outlet covering it live via holo. Shenzhou and Dr. Gadhavi will be the stars of the show. Gadhavi conducts the demonstration. He would make it theatrical. And what am I to do? Said Shenzhou. Clap and look Chinese? If so, we're in luck. I excel at both. Your part's more involved than that, said Ketkar. Following the demonstration, you would then make a few heartfelt comments to the press. Again, said Shenzhou, I'm nobody. Why would the press care what I have to say? Because you are the liaison officer of the great General Sima, the brilliant Chinese commander who destroyed a Formic lander. You will say that Sima ordered you to bring a sample of the gas to Dr. Gadhavi in the event that something happened to the Chinese science team. You want me to lie on camera? General Sima is an international hero, said Ketkar. And now that he's deceased, many in China see him as a martyr, a symbol. Sending you here is precisely the type of move a brilliant commander like him would make. So Sima gets credit for yet another victory he had nothing to do with, said Shenzhou. Are we certain Sima is dead? Said Mazer. I don't mean to be indelicate, but it would be embarrassing if we did this only to have Sima appear on the nets debunking the whole operation. He's dead, said Ketkar. His body was recovered in Leauge 5 days ago. There was such admiration for the man. The Chinese made a concerted effort to find him and handle his remains respectfully. Shenzhou said, So I speak to the press and tell a flagrant lie about my former commanding officer. What good will that do? You will say more than that, said Ketkar. You will praise General Sima for his foresight, yes, but you will also call the development of the counter-agent a shining example of two nations unifying under a single cause to defeat a common enemy. The whole world should emulate this pattern. We must all stand united. You're making this a political speech, said Shenzhou. I am not a politician, nor can I speak on behalf of my government. You won't be speaking on their behalf, said Ketkar. You'll be speaking on your own behalf, as a liaison officer, as a husband, as a father to your children. Shenzhou regarded him skeptically. What does my family have to do with it? Everything, said Ketkar. Their safety motivates everything you do, Captain. We know you better than you might think. We know, for example, that you are one of the Anonymous 12. Shenzhou didn't move or respond. After an awkward silence, Mazer looked at the others and said, Am I the only one here who doesn't know what that means? Ketkar said, The Anonymous 12 is the name the Chinese military has given to the unknown Chinese military personnel who gave you MOPS the nuke you needed to destroy the lander. They are, in that sense, traitors to their country. Captain Shenzhou here was critical in orchestrating that entire effort. Mazer turned to Shenzhou. Is that true? Shenzhou took a deep breath before answering. What I did for China, its people, and my loved ones. Action had to be taken. You helped us get the nuke, and then you arrested us, said Mazer. I arrested you under Sima's orders, said Shenzhou. Well, actually, he had given the arrest orders to another officer, but I intervened and requested that he give them to me instead. I wanted to ensure you weren't harmed in the process. Mazer turned to Witt. Did you know this? No, said Witt, but I suspected. Shenzhou faced Ketkar. So you intend to blackmail me, Major, is that it? If I don't say what you want me to say and perform for the cameras, you will reveal my crime to my government and keep me from my family forever? We don't have to blackmail you, said Ketkar. We don't even have to ask you to do this. You will do it because you know it's the right thing to do. This is more than just two countries putting aside their differences for the greater good, Captain. This is the beginning of a new Earth, a new way of operating, one that can only lead to greater peace among all nations. This is what we should have done before the Formics arrived. Ketkar put a hand on Shenzu's shoulder. Now is the time, Captain. General Sima has started a movement. You can give it life. Your words could be the first intelligent approach to this disaster that anyone has heard. You seem to have a very specific idea of what I should say. Is there a speech written? Someone wrote one, yes. It was excellent. I told him to burn it. This has to come from you. It has to be genuine. Shenzu was quiet a moment. Show me the counter-agent. Then we'll talk. Ketkar smiled and beckoned them to follow. This way. He led them to a small structure in the center of the plaza that turned out to be a set of elevators. They climbed in and Ketkar slid back a concealed panel and entered a code. The elevator descended. When it stopped, they stepped out into a bright, immaculate corridor. Through the windows to their right and left, Mazer saw technicians and scientists in blue biohazard suits working with various machines, scanners, and diagnostic equipment. Ketkar kept moving, leading them deeper into the complex down a series of corridors. Finally, they stepped into an observation room with a vaulted ceiling. The wall to Mazer's left was solid glass. The room beyond it was mostly empty, save for a metal table to one side, atop of which sat various plastic boxes and liquid containers. A short Indian man in his late 60s was standing in the observation room at a computer terminal. The sleeves of his blue Oxford shirt were rolled up past his elbows. Gloves made of reflective sequined fabric covered his hands and forearms. His face brightened when he saw them. "Captain O'Toole, we meet again." "Dr. Gadhavi, a pleasure as always." Gadhavi approached, and Witt introduced Mazer and Shenzu. Gadhavi bowed. "Welcome to India, gentlemen. I am sorry we are meeting under these circumstances. Please, won't you stand here behind this line? I'm told everyone is ready and we can begin." It was only then that Mazer noticed the small cameras on the wall behind them. Other spectators would be watching, apparently. Gadhavi walked to the center of the room in front of the glass wall where a red circle was painted on the floor. As soon as he stepped on it, hollow projectors above him turned on and bathed him in a holofield. He put his back to the glass and faced them, directing his words at the cameras. "The formic gas is a highly toxic, cell wall degrading enzyme solution. In principle, it's not unlike, say, phytopathogenic fungi here on Earth, which degrade plant biomass at an alarming rate. The difference, of course, is its toxicity. The formic's gas is 1,000 times worse than our nastiest fungi. It eats through lignocellulose, for example, which is often resistant to enzymatic degradation as if it were cotton candy. And we've all seen what it can do to humans. It breaks down cell walls and initiates a proteolytic process that is not unlike what our digestive system does to a bite of steak. In short, it turns biomass into gooey pulp. But that's the bad news." He turned around and faced the glass wall. In the holofield, his sequined gloves twinkled in the light. He raised his arms to the side, and two long robotic arms in the other room lowered from their recessed hiding place in the ceiling. Gadhavi walked in place, turned his head slightly to the right, and the robotic arms moved along a track in the ceiling in the direction Gadhavi indicated. The arms came to a stop at the table, and Gadhavi spread his fingers apart. The ends of the robotic arms split and separated, forming matching digits. Using the bot arms as an extension of his own, Gadhavi lifted two sealed, liter-sized jugs off the table, carried them to the center of the empty room, and set them a distance apart on the floor. Then he turned and faced the cameras. "Those two containers beyond the glass wall each hold 600 milliliters of the formic solution, or goo, as the soldiers call it. The protein looks like this." A giant model of a globular protein appeared in the holofield beside him. As you can see, it has a very complex tertiary and quaternary structure in which the polypeptides fold around each other to essentially form a sphere. This shape is maintained by hydrogen bonds and ionic forces. Altering its shape through heat, a change in pH, or non-reversible inhibition renders the enzyme denatured or useless. The molecular structure may be alien and unlike anything we've ever seen, but the laws of chemistry are universal. We may not have mastered interstellar flight, but we do know how to shake up a molecule. That's the good news. He flicked his hand and the protein disappeared. Then he turned and faced the glass wall again. He lifted his arms, maneuvered the robotic arms back to the table, and picked up a glass jar of orange liquid with a screwed top. This, ladies and gentlemen, is our counteragent, an enzyme inhibitor preheated to 60 degrees Celsius. When it's fired at the goo, the heat causes some of the formic enzymes to vibrate so violently that the delicate bonds that maintain their molecular structure are broken. The inhibitors take care of the rest, rendering the entire enzyme solution useless. But that's not even the fun part. Once the molecule changes its shape, we can do whatever we want with it, including turning it against the formics. Gadhavi moved his hands. Inside the other room, the robot arms came to life and unscrewed the lid from the jar. When they were finished, the bot arms set the jar back on the table and lifted a shotgun from a gun case. A sprayer mechanism with its own barrel adjacent to the shotgun barrel was mounted on the underside of the weapon. The bot arms picked up the jar of orange counteragent again and screwed it into the bottom of the sprayer. Gadhavi said, "We have two objectives in China as far as the gas is concerned. One, clearing the air of what's already been sprayed, and two, destroying the goo guns and other caches. This weapon is designed to do both. For the gas in the air, it can spray a mist." Inside the room, the lid popped off one of the two jugs of goo on the floor. Gas poured upward, a swirling fog of grayish-green vapor. Gadhavi got into a firing position. In the other room, the gun unleashed a thick stream of orange mist into the cloud. When the two solutions met, the fog became a fireball that flashed bright and then snuffed out a heartbeat later, like a lit match tossed into a pan of gunpowder. The now empty jug skittered across the floor and bounced off the opposite wall. "The other jug is like a goo tank," said Gadhavi. "We made it with a substance of similar durability. The shotgun round has an armor-piercing slug that punctures the goo tank and releases pellets of our counteragent into the goo. Since both solutions are concentrated, the reaction is even more volatile." The robot arm cocked the shotgun, aimed, and fired. The jug took the round dead center and shot across the floor, spinning. 1 second passed, then another. Nothing happened. Then the jug detonated like a bomb, and tiny fragments of shrapnel pinged against the glass. Gadhavi turned around and faced them. "Since it's orange, spicy, and cooks formics, we're calling the counteragent deli duck sauce." He smiled at his own joke. "How do we know the goo has been neutralized?" Witt asked. "You've demonstrated that you can create a violent reaction, but you haven't proven that the air is clear. How do we know there aren't lethal traces of it still in there?" Gadhavi's smile broadened. "Captain O'Toole, you never disappoint, always with the tough questions. But you're right. Pyrotechnics will not solve our problem if the counteragent doesn't completely neutralize the goo. I couldn't have asked for a better setup to the final portion of our demonstration." Gadhavi faced the glass again and made a few hand gestures in the holofield. In the demonstration room, a door slid open, and a chimpanzee stepped out into the room. "The demonstration room has not been ventilated since I released the gas," said Gadhavi. "The air has not been filtered in any manner. The test subject is breathing the same air that was exposed to highly lethal doses of the gas only moments ago." Long handrails lowered a foot from the ceiling. The chimp jumped up and grabbed them and began swinging around the room. Even with increased breaths and when moving to all corners of the room, the test subject remains perfectly healthy. No melting of the skin, no cell degradation. I could release a dozen more animals or people in the room with the same result. And should you require it, I can analyze the air and prove the gas is neutralized. For a moment, Mazer and the others were too stunned to speak. How quickly can you mass produce this? Asked Witt. The formula isn't terribly complex, said Gadhavi. If we could commandeer a few chemical facilities with the right capabilities, we could make a few thousand barrels in a week. If China were to join in the effort, we would make 4 times that many. What about the weapons and shotgun rounds? Said Shenzhou. How long would it take to mass produce those? The assault weapon is an industrial paint sprayer bolted to a shotgun, said Gadhavi. There's also a heating mechanism attached to the sprayer to keep the duck sauce hot. That requires a heavy battery. Our prototype is fairly crude. The gun isn't balanced well. We're not weapons designers. We only made that one for the demonstration. Same with the shotgun slugs. Mass producing those would take time, I suspect. We don't have time, said Witt. We need to mobilize soldiers now. If a team of scientists unfamiliar with weaponry can retrofit a shotgun, soldiers should be able to do so in their sleep. Who cares if the gun is balanced or not? It works. That's all that matters. Even if soldiers do it themselves, said Ketkar, we still need to supply them with detailed instructions. We will, said Witt. Mops made a site on the nets for sharing combat tactics with the Chinese military. StopTheFormix.net. We upload the instructions there and wherever else we think the military may be looking. In the meantime, we contact every manufacturer in the world who makes a similar paint sprayer, and we kick their production lines into overdrive. We'll need more than foot soldiers, said Shenzhou. We'll cover more ground if we retrofit military aircrafts with crop-dusting sprayers. That would take time, said Mazer. You'd have to gut the aircraft to make room for the tanks, then build and modify the sprayers for every class of aircraft. Plus, you'd need to train pilots. We could mobilize faster if we enlist aerial firefighters and seasoned crop dusters. Their planes are ready to go, and they have the needed skill. I consider myself a decent pilot, but liquid falls differently than cargo or bombs. It's easy to overshoot or drop too early. I'd much rather have a crop duster at the stick. And fire crews, said Witt. The chemical reaction is so volatile we should have 2 or 3 fire crews shadowing every assault team. In fact, China should immediately begin training a quarter of its army on fire control, particularly in urban areas. If we burn cities to the ground, we haven't done the Chinese any favors. Mazer nodded. Strike teams will need flame-resistant suits over their biosuits, something that can withstand intense flash fires. We'll find plenty of those in heavy manufacturing and firefighter units. Maybe we ask firehouses and the private sector all over the world to donate what suits they have. Ketkar stepped forward. Yes, there is much to consider. And China would be wise to involve all of you in the strategic development of the operation. But unless China agrees to troop assistance, unless we have fresh boots on the ground, we won't make a dent in the Formix. Captain Shenzhou, are you willing to face the cameras? I should give the speech in Chinese, said Shenzhou. If it's coming from the heart, I should speak in Chinese.
24 hours later, Major Ketkar stood at a rostrum before a crowd of 300 reporters, humbly thanking them all for coming. They had gathered inside a vast empty hangar at a weapons test site northeast of New Delhi. Behind Ketkar was a massive glass terrarium as big as a small home. The terrarium had been Ketkar's idea. He had ordered its construction early in the week and had filled the bottom of it with earth. Shrubs and small trees had been planted to simulate the terrain in China, and a projected image on the back wall showed a beautiful rice field in a green mountain valley. "What would you have done if I had said no?" Shenzhou had asked when he saw the setup. "We knew you wouldn't," Ketkar had said. "You love your country." Every seat in the hangar was taken. Most of the reporters were correspondents stationed in India and working for the major networks. Others had flown in for the event from Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Thousands more were watching the event live throughout the world. Holo projectors and traditional 2D cameras were set up all around the stage. A few special seats had been reserved down front for the Chinese ambassador to India and his senior staff. An Indian paracommando in a fire-resistant yellow biosuit was inside the terrarium holding the modified paint sprayer shotgun. Gaddafi had wanted to use the robotic arms again for safety, but Ketkar had flatly refused. Soldiers will be doing this in the field. I want the press to see China being saved by a PC. Besides, you look like an idiot in those socks and gloves. Late-night comedians would have a field day with that. We need the world to applaud us, not mock us. From his place at the rostrum, Ketkar introduced the PC and briefly gave an account of his impeccable service record and training. The subtle message was clear. PCs are excellent soldiers and would be an asset to the war. Ketkar then turned the rostrum over to Dr. Gaddafi, who walked on stage wearing a white lab coat over his Oxford shirt and slacks. "But I never wear a lab coat," he had told Ketkar before the presentation. "That's so cliché." "You'll wear it and you'll smile about it," Ketkar had told him through gritted teeth. They had rehearsed the presentation several times beforehand. Gaddafi really worked the crowd. They laughed at his two jokes and listened intently as he went through the chemistry of it all. Ketkar had worried that this part was too dry and needed some more cutting, but Gaddafi had pushed back, and Ketkar had acquiesced. It had been the right decision. The crowd was hanging on every word. Then it was showtime. Inside the terrarium, a formic emerged from behind a large shrub. A goo gun was strapped to its back, the wand in its hand. The special effects company had done its best to make the creature look fearsome and lifelike, and Ketkar had to admit they did an impressive job. It hung from a wire rig positioned in the ceiling and moved out like a marionette. A murmur from the audience. A few people gasped. When the PC aimed the weapon, it was absolute silence. When he fired at the goo tank, and the formic and goo pack exploded in a fireball of absolute devastation that sent formic parts flying in every direction, the room erupted with applause and cheers. Some people were out of their seats. One woman near the front was actually crying. For a moment, Ketkar wondered if the demonstration alone was enough. Even the Chinese ambassador was cheering. But no, this was theater, the energy of the crowd. Beijing would be a different story. Shenzhou was the pièce de résistance. Gaddafi waved and exited to another round of applause. Then Shenzhou walked on stage. The crowd quieted. Another murmur went through them. A Chinese officer had not been on the agenda. Shenzhou walked past the rostrum and faced them center stage. He waited for total silence, then gave the speech from memory in Chinese. English subtitles appeared on the front of the stage beneath him, visible to everyone. When he mentioned Sima's name, there was a murmur among the audience. Sima? The General Sima? "He told me about his children and grandchildren," said Shenzhou. "He said he would do anything to protect them. He asked me about my own children, 6-year-old Shidu and 2-year-old Mingshu. My duty to them is greater than all others," he said. He gestured back to the PC in the terrarium. "I thank my brother in the para-commandos and the good Dr. Gaddafi, who have worked so hard to honor General Sima's final request and to take steps to keep all of our children safe." My brother. Ketkar smiled. He had read the speech several times, but that part always hit home in his heart. A Chinese calling an Indian his brother. And not a politician posing for photos at some summit. A soldier. A common man. It was the entirety of the message summed up in 2 simple words. Shenzhou need not mention any proposal for troops. That was for others to handle. His job was to pave the road for others to follow. And they would follow, Ketkar knew. The last part of the speech left no question in his mind. "Let us come together," Shenzhou said. "All of us, not just China and India." As if such a thing had already happened, as if their alliance was already sealed. "But all nations. We will need everyone's help, everyone's hand, everyone's might. China is where the war began, but a united Earth is where the war will end." They cheered him. They rose to their feet. The Chinese ambassador came to the lip of the stage and shook his hand. Ketkar cued the house lights. There would be no Q&A session. End with a bang, when the mood was high. Shenzhou was escorted off by aides. So sorry, Captain Shenzhou has other duties. Then the doors were opened, and the reporters released. The microblogs lit up immediately. The vid had played live all over the world, and everyone took to the nets. Women were asking if the PC was single. Someone found photos of Shenzhou's adorable children, and those spread like wildfire. Sima's photo was passed around as well. Someone put his head on the body of the PC in the yellow jumpsuit with the caption, "Want some duck sauce with that, Bugface?" But the posts from the citizens of China were the ones that got the most bounces and reposts. Vids of women crying, giving heartfelt thanks. Their deceased sons and husbands in the military will not have died in vain. Children cheered. Celebrities echoed the cry for unification. And on in a deluge of unstoppable support, all of it linked with the net tag, Earth United. Ketkar returned to his temporary office in the hangar and waited. It was only a matter of time now. He looked again at the maps. He would accompany Mazer, Wit, Shenzhou, and a team of PCs to the Donut Tower where a large cache of goo was stored. Destroying it would be their first mission in China. A sort of ceremonial kickoff event with plenty of pyrotechnics. He would likely lose Mazer, Wit, and Shenzhou after that. The Chinese would insist that they help with the operation's development. Ketkar would almost insist upon it. He had greater faith in their strategic thinking than his own or anyone else's in either military. That would put the three of them in a war room somewhere instead of in the thick of the fighting, but the operation already had its share of martyrs. What it needed now was minds. Messages from his superiors flooded his inbox. They all praised him for the press conference. The subtext was obvious. Remember me when you're promoted, Ketkar. I am your true friend. Let us rise together. Ketkar deleted them after reading the subject line. They were from parasites and careerists. It wasn't until later that he received the message he had been waiting for. An encrypted one that would self-delete after he had read it. It was the only message that mattered. The one that would cement his future. There were only 2 words. Well done. And to Ketkar's great surprise, Uko Jukes had included a smiley face emoticon.
This audiobook has been broken into multiple parts to make the download faster. You have reached the end of a part, but not the end of the complete audiobook. So please check your library for the next part of this audiobook.
Audible hopes you have enjoyed this program.
This is Audible.
Macmillan Audio presents Earth Awakens by Orson Scott Card and Aaron Johnston. Read for you by Stephen Hoy, Arthur Morey, and Stefan Rudnicki, with Vikas Adam, Roxanne Hernandez, and Emily Rankin.
Chapter 14. Dragon's Den. Bingwen and the Mops were standing on a dusty 2-lane road 10 clicks southeast of Dragon's Den when the truck arrived to pick them up. All around them was death and rot. The road they were on cut through the center of a valley filled with rice fields, and the formic gas had killed everything here a long time ago. Paddy frogs lay belly up in the muck, their skin sun-scorched and dry as a raisin. A bloated water buffalo lay half submerged in the mud, decomposing amid a cloud of flies. The rice crop lay withered and black atop the standing water, the surface of which glistened with a toxic, oily film. The sight of it all made Bingwen grateful for his radiation suit, which kept out the gag-inducing smell of decay. The truck parked directly in front of them, and the Chinese soldier behind the wheel hopped down, moved to the back of the truck, and lowered the gate for them to board. He wore a biosuit, and when he turned back, Bingwen saw that he was only a boy. 14 at the most, not even old enough to drive. The suit was probably the smallest size available, but like Bingwen's, it hung limp on the soldier's narrow shoulders like a rubber blanket. Were boys lying about their ages now to enlist? Bingwen wondered. The influx of Indian commandos was alleviating the burden on the Chinese military, but maybe it wasn't enough. Maybe China still needed anyone willing to join the fight. Bingwen doubted the military would take him, however. He was small for an 8-year-old, and even the most lenient of recruiters wouldn't believe him a day over 10. A young Chinese lieutenant got out of the cab on the passenger side, and Bingwen knew at once that there would be trouble. The lieutenant was tall and thin, with a hard, tight line for a mouth and suspicious eyes that darted between all of the mops in an instant. A sidearm was holstered at the waist of his biosuit, and his hand rested on it as he approached. He spotted Bingwen and crinkled his nose. "I was told to bring in soldiers, not boys." His English was good, but his accent was heavy. "He's part of our unit," said Dean. "A boy among a group of men. One can't help but wonder what you used him for." Bingwen didn't understand the lieutenant's meaning, but it was clearly offensive. Dean smiled in that way he did sometimes when he wanted to throttle someone. "What's your name, Lieutenant?" Dean asked pleasantly. The lieutenant put his hands on his hips. "Lee." "Well, Lieutenant Lee, we're mops. We've spent the last 2 weeks blowing up transports and skimmers and about 300 formics, give or take, without any word from our commanding officer. So when he calls us out of the blue and tells us to meet him at Dragon's Den, we obviously stop what we're doing and come. He's even going to send a truck to pick us up. Great, says I. But then you show up, and something tells me you didn't read your orders very closely because you're being difficult. I was told to pick up mops, not children. Bingwen is a mop. A little shorter than most, maybe, but he's been an integral part of our success. Lee scoffed. You gave a weapon to a child? He may not carry a gun, Lee, but he knows the land, he knows the language, and he knows a few ways to kill formics. He's got tactics in that little head of his that none of us had considered. His takedown idea for the transports has resulted in about... He looked at the others. How many would you say? 10, 12 destroyed transports? He turned back to Lee. Can you say that, Lieutenant? Can you say you've been responsible for destroying a dozen transports? Lee glanced down at Bingwen, and there was only disdain in his eyes. When he lifted his gaze back to Dean, he said, I'm to take you to a secret military facility. It's no place for a child. Agreed, said Dean. But Dragon's Den is a big place, we're told. There are camps of civilians there as well. There's shelter and food for those who need it. Surely Bingwen has earned that much. The camps are beyond capacity. Dean sighed. Lieutenant, get on your radio. Call Dragon's Den. Ask for Captain Whit O'Toole. He's probably swapping war stories with a few of your generals right now. I'm sure they won't mind the interruption. Ask them if it's all right if Bingwen comes. I'm willing to bet all the tea left in China that you were supposed to bring him anyway. Lieutenant Lee scowled. Or if you prefer to be difficult, said Dean, kindly point us in the direction of Dragon's Den and we'll walk there ourselves. When you arrive, you can explain to your commanding officer why you failed such a simple assignment. The lieutenant's grip tightened around his handgun, and for an instant, Bingwen thought everything would end badly. But then Lieutenant Lee came to his senses and removed his hand from his holster. Very well. The boy may come, but all of you must relinquish your weapons. Really? Thought Bingwen. Are you that desperate to assert your authority? You make a mistake, and rather than accepting it and moving on, you try to manipulate us some other way. How did this guy become a lieutenant? But Dean wasn't having it. He started walking toward the back of the truck. If we get attacked by a Formic death squad, Lieutenant, I doubt you want our weapons up in the cab with you. And with that, the mops loaded up into the truck fully armed without another word. Bingwen sat between Cocktail and Zizi, and when Dean sat across from him, he gave Bingwen a wink. They drove across blackened countryside and through mud so thick that twice the mops had to get out and push. Much of the land had been scoured, or stripped clean by the massive Formic harvesters that collected all the biomass the Formic gas had killed. In those areas, there was nothing left behind except for long strips of naked earth. But there were also places where the Formic gas had done its work, but no harvester had come. These were the grisliest sights. Corpses, human and animal, vegetation black and dissolving, all of it slowly melting into the mud. Bingwen turned away as he always did. Mother had died that way. Father too. He stared at the tips of his boots and tried to take his mind elsewhere. The truck finally slowed and pulled into a massive hangar in the side of a mountain. The giant sliding doors closed behind them with a clang, sealing them inside. Bingwen and the others took off their helmets and breathed in fresh air. The hangar was being used as a garage, Bingwen saw. Dozens of mechanics were hard at work repairing and outfitting all class of vehicles and aircraft. Adding armor, installing guns, ripping parts from junked vehicles and welding them onto others. The air smelled of grease and rubber and burned wiring. Bingwen stood with the others to climb down from the truck when Mazer appeared at the tailgate. He saw Bingwen and smiled. Hey, troublemaker. Long time no see. Bingwen couldn't help himself. He leaped from the back of the truck into Mazer's arms. Mazer laughed and lowered him to the ground. Whoa, ho, ho. You've gained about 1,000 pounds, Bing. What are they feeding you? Boulders?
How is India? Asked Bingwen. Why didn't you radio us?
Boring. And they wouldn't let us call anyone. Did you see the donut tower explode?
About 12 times on the nets. Dean was trying to make the sound of the ring chime on his wrist pad. Did you see the vids we uploaded at the site?
Mazer gave Dean a disapproving look. I did. And I wonder what possessed Dean to allow an 8-year-old near a firefight. You'll want to talk, said Dean. You took Bing to the lander. And anyway, he wasn't near the firefight in that vid. He was tucked away elsewhere. We kept him out of danger. Mostly. He shrugged. And maybe you've forgotten how obstinate this kid can be. He's more stubborn than Wit. I heard that. They turned. Wit approached them from behind. The mops all greeted him with smiles, embraces, and slaps on the back. Zizi said, Done with your vacation, Captain? Yeah, said Cocktail. While you were getting foot massages and grapes fed to you in India, the rest of us were fighting a war. If I had a sucker, I'd give you one, Cocktail, said Wit. He smiled warmly. I'm glad to see you all safe. They hadn't suffered a single casualty since Wit and Mazer had left them. They all knew it was nothing short of a miracle. It's Bingwen, said Bungie. "He's our good luck charm." Lieutenant Lee cleared his throat.
Pardon me, gentlemen, but we are on a schedule.
He gestured to the boy who had driven the truck.
Private Hun here will escort your boy to the civilian barracks. The rest of you will come with me.
Bingwen's high at seeing Mazer took a nosedive. It wasn't fair. How long had they been standing here? 2 minutes? 3? He had barely said hello. Mazer took a knee in front of Bingwen, and the two of them embraced.
Can I visit you?
Said Bingwen.
Absolutely not,
said Lieutenant Lee. Mazer gave Lee a withering look. He was asking me, hotshot. Go splash some cold water in your face. He turned back to Bingwen. It's a restricted area, Bing. I'm not allowed to leave either.
What are you doing in there?
Looking at maps and arguing with people. Believe me, you're not missing anything.
Sounds important.
It's called Operation Duck Sauce.
That's classified, said Lee. He shouldn't know that.
Mazer and Bingwen ignored him.
Do you think we'll win?
Asked Bingwen. I think we have a decent chance, now that everyone is helping. But we're a long way from winning.
Getting the Indians involved, that was smart.
I can't take the credit for that, but yes, smart. They're good soldiers. Companies are helping as well. They're shipping supplies. We're getting equipment all the way from the U.S. and South America. It's quite the operation.
What will the MOPS be doing?
Helping to manage everything, leading strike teams from here. China has lost a lot of its commanders. They need people they can trust to lead the various units.
You should be leading the whole army.
Mazer laughed. Hardly. But I'm learning how that's done. Captain O'Toole is as good with 1 million soldiers as he is with 3 or 4. Lieutenant Lee cleared his throat again. The MOPS were waiting. Bingwen said,
So we'll be near each other, and yet a world apart.
You'll be out of the fighting, Bing. That's what's important. This is a safe place.
So this is goodbye?
Mazer put a hand behind Bingwen's head. It will never be goodbye between us, Bing. He pulled Bingwen's face close until their foreheads and noses touched. Then he pulled away. In Maori culture, that's a hongi, a traditional greeting. It means we are both Tangata Wenua now, people of the land, brothers, sharing in the breath of life. Bingwen nodded.
Brothers.
He threw his arms around Mazer's neck, and they embraced a final time. Then Mazer stood and tousled Bingwen's hair. Stay safe, troublemaker. They parted, and Bingwen began to turn away, but then he remembered something.
Oh, and Mazer!
Mazer turned back. Bingwen tapped his forehead with a finger.
One in the head, good and dead.
Mazer smiled. It had been something Captain O'Toole had said to the men repeatedly, and it had grown into a sort of salutation whenever one of them went off to scout ahead or leave on patrol. It meant, if you see a Formic, don't hesitate. Put a bullet in its brain. We're a bad influence on you, Bing.
Terrible. I'm probably scarred for life.
Bingwen followed Private Hun toward a metal staircase that led downward to the refugee camps. As they descended, Bingwen asked in Chinese,
How old are you? 18,
Hun said.
How old are you really?
Asked Bingwen. Hun looked sheepish and lowered his voice.
15. You enlisted here?
Hun nodded.
My village is gone. My mother, grandfather, little sister, they all...
He shook his head, not wanting to speak of it. Then he found his voice again.
I didn't have to do any training. I just told them I drove farming equipment and they gave me a uniform. You think they'd give me an assignment?
Hun scoffed.
You? How old are you? 7? 8. Laundry, maybe. Or latrines. But as a civilian, not a soldier.
Bingwen shrugged.
Doesn't make much difference, I suppose.
Hun seemed affronted.
Of course it does. As a soldier, you can fight. Did they give you a weapon? Well, no. But if it comes to a fight, I'll take one, you can be sure of that.
They continued downward until they reached the bottom level, where Bingwen began to hear the cry of infants, the chatter and shuffle and movement of hundreds of people living in a small space.
You're to go to Mama Goshi,
said Hun.
She's the keeper of Claw. And believe me, she's not going to be happy to see you. Claw? There are 4 barracks in Dragon's Den, each named for a part of the dragon. Claw, Fire, Fang, Wings. You're in Claw. Why won't Mama Goshi want to see me? Because you have a stomach and you're a kid, which means you'll eat food and not prove very useful. A drain. I'm not completely useless,
said Bingwen. Hun smiled, as if he thought Bingwen naive. They arrived at a warehouse-sized room that was now a camp. Hundreds of cots were packed together. Hammocks hung between columns. Bedrolls lined the walls and everywhere else, save for narrow aisles between the rows of living spaces. Women, children, the elderly, all practically on top of each other.
Welcome to Claw,
said Hun.
You might want to put that helmet back on. It smells like piss and sweat and antiseptic in here.
And worse things besides, thought Bingwen. He passed a washing station where women scrubbed sheets and clothing in large plastic buckets, then hung them dripping wet on lines above drainage grates in the floor. He passed a group of old men huddled around a hollow pad that looked almost as old as they were, the news reporter on screen flickering and fading as the signal came and went. He passed others who stared back at him, their faces blank and despondent. Mothers nursed infants. Old men coughed. Children ran and played, oblivious to their plight. Injured people with bandages lay in cots at a nurse's station. A shriveled old woman in the corner, clutching a bundle of blankets, rocked back and forth softly, singing a lullaby. If there was an infant in her bundle, Bingwen didn't see one. Bingwen tried smiling as he made eye contact, but no one returned the gesture. Hun led him to the back corner, where several sheets hung from the ceiling to form a small room. Mama Goshi was inside cutting open a box. When Hun introduced Bingwen, Mama Goshi grunted with exasperation and said,
And what am I to do with a boy? Especially one in a rubber suit meant for someone twice his size. What ails you, boy? You keeping a virus in there just for yourself?
She was wrinkled and weathered and slightly humpbacked, wearing a pink flowered dress long faded from the sun and a pair of mismatched slippers. Bingwen bowed.
No, Nai-Nai. I'm healthy.
Mama Goshi nodded, pleased.
You were taught to respect your elders, at least. By your parents, I suspect. Both of them dead.
It didn't sound like a question, but Bingwen nodded nonetheless.
Well, off with the spacesuit. No one obviously cares that I don't have room or food for another mouth, even one as small as yours. But I see I don't get a say in the matter.
She waved a dismissive hand at Hun.
Get out of my face before I change my mind.
Hun hurried away without another word, while Bingwen stepped out of his radiation suit. Mama Goshi put her hands on her hips and appraised him.
Skinny and scrawny and probably good for nothing. Can you clean toilets? Yes, Nai-Nai.
The old woman waved a hand again.
Enough with the formalities. I'm Mama Goshi here. Keep calling me Nai-Nai and people will think you're my real grandson, which you aren't and never will be. No, Mama Goshi.
She nodded.
Fast learner. Good. What's your name?
He bowed again.
Bingwen. Well, Bingwen, when I say I don't have food for you, I mean it.
She pointed to a small pile of boxes.
You see these? They contain today's food. Bottles of protein vitamin drink. That's our diet. It tastes like grass and grit, but it keeps us alive. Now, there are 978 people in Claw, and I'm supposed to feed them all with this.
It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to feed half that many.
So if you think you're out of the woods down here, said Mama Goshi, you're mistaken. This is only a different kind of hell.
I can work, said Bingwen.
You will, until your fingers bleed if I have my say. In the meantime, go find a place to sleep over there.
She gestured to a row of cots where children were gathered. He bowed.
Yes, Mama Goshi.
She turned away from him and began to speak with someone else who had approached. Bingwen got the message. He was dismissed. He scooped up his radiation suit and went to the cots. A circle of boys sat on the floor playing rock dice. Behind them, a girl about 9 years old was kneeling by a cot, dabbing a sick boy's forehead with a damp cloth. She saw Bingwen, stood, and glowered at him.
I'm Bingwen. Mama Goshi sent me here to find a place to sleep. There's no room, said the girl. Not even for a stick like you. Beat it. Is there an adult I can talk to?
Asked Bingwen, looking around. The girl narrowed her eyes.
This here is Orphan Alley, stick. Kids without guardians. We're the table scraps. You want to go cry to an adult? You'll have to go somewhere else.
The young boy on the cot clutched his stomach and moaned.
What's wrong with him?
Asked Bingwen.
What do you care?
Said the girl.
Has he seen one of the nurses?
Bingwen asked. He gestured toward the nurse's station he had seen near the entrance.
Oh, I get it,
said the girl.
You want us to cart him off to the nurses so you can get his cot. Well, forget it. He and I share. This cot is ours. I don't want your cot. I'm happy to sleep on the floor. I just meant he looks like he needs help. Are there any doctors down here?
The girl relaxed somewhat.
There are 2, for all 4,000 of us. We're on the list to see one in 2 days. Maybe.
She looked back at the boy, concerned.
He's getting worse. I tried to take him to Mama Goshi, but he can't even walk anymore.
Bingwen could see the resemblance now. They were siblings. A younger brother.
I have a device that's like a doctor,
said Bingwen.
It's called a med assist. It can tell people what's wrong with them and explain how to fix it.
He put down his suit and pulled the med assist from the knapsack draped across his back. The boys playing dice were suddenly curious. The holopad had belonged to Mazer Rackham and was designed for military field use. Before it had lost its charge on the mountain, Bingwen had used it to save Mazer's life.
We can help each other,
said Bingwen.
You let me sleep here, and I'll help you with your brother.
The girl looked skeptical.
A magical device, huh? Show me where I can charge it,
said Bingwen,
and I'll show you how it works.
Several of the younger boys jumped up, volunteering, but the girl pushed one to the ground and threatened to do the same to the others.
I'm taking him. You dirt clods stay with Nero.
She turned to Bingwen.
If you're lying about this device, stick, I'll put a boot up your crack. You don't wear boots, Peepo,
teased one of the boys.
Shut up,
said Peepo.
Or you'll need a doctor. Ooh, said the boys. The tigress is loose. The tigress is loose.
Peepo ignored them. She motioned Bingwen to follow her, and she led him to a charging station out in the main tunnel. A line of people were waiting with various items. Lanterns, wrist pads, space heaters. Bingwen and Peepo got in behind them.
If you are lying about this device, she said, I mean it. I'll cut you in your sleep.
She was all bluster and no bite, Bingwen saw. He wondered if she had always been that way, or if the Formix had done this to her. Probably the latter, just as the Formix had changed him, bringing his survival instinct front and center and burying the person he used to be under a mountain of grief. What had she endured, he wondered. Had she seen her parents die? Had she found their corpses as Bingwen had? Or had she been spared that? Maybe she and her brother Nero were merely separated from their parents. Maybe they clung to the hope of reuniting somehow.
So, where are you from?
Asked Bingwen.
What do you care? I'm from Leauge, or a village near there anyway. My family farmed rice. Yeah, you and everyone else. So what? How long have you been here? This isn't an interview, Stick. Stop asking questions. Sorry. I haven't seen someone my age in a while. I guess I'm kind of hungry for conversation. Well, the rest of us are hungry for food. So unless you've got some in that pack of yours, keep your questions to yourself. Get used to questions. That's how the device makes a diagnosis and determines what to test. It asks a lot of questions.
Her scowl softened.
Like what? Like, how long has your brother been hurting?
She looked worried again.
Since last night. It started as a stomachache, but now he can't bear it. I stole some pain pills from the med closet, but I wasn't sure how much to give him. Bug said if I gave Nero too much, his heart might stop.
She opened the palm of her hand to show him 4 white tablets.
What do you think? I think we need to hurry and charge this.
Pipo saw that he was serious, grabbed his wrist, and pulled him to the front of the line. She pushed the girl aside who was using the charger and gave it to Bingwen, who immediately started gathering juice into the device. People in line objected. Some cursed. A woman threatened to intervene, but Pipo gave her a look that would melt stone and told her that they were charging this for Mamagoshi, who needed it immediately, and if the woman didn't like it, she could go take it up with Mamagoshi herself. Then the medicist was ready, and Pipo and Bingwen were running off. Back at the cots, the children gathered around when Bingwen booted up the device and placed it over Nero's stomach.
This isn't going to hurt him, is it?
Asked Pipo.
No,
said Bingwen.
Just have him lie still.
He tapped through the commands, typed in the symptoms, and listened to the instructions.
What language is that?
Said one of the boys.
English, bonehead,
said Pipo.
What does it say, Bingwen? It says I need to prick his finger and check his blood.
For a moment, he thought Pipo would object, but then she gripped her brother's hand and nodded for Bingwen to continue. Bingwen swabbed Nero's fingertip, retracted the disposable needle prick, and stuck the boy's finger. Nero cried out, and Bingwen placed a drop of blood on the scanner.
He has an infection,
Bingwen said, once the results came in.
And now it's telling me to press on his stomach. No,
said Nero.
You said you weren't going to hurt him,
said Pipo.
So far, that's all you've done. This is how the device works,
said Bingwen.
I do some tests. The more results it has, the more accurate the diagnosis. This is exactly what a doctor would do.
Pipo hesitated again. Nero clung to her. The other boys looked uneasy. A few adults had gathered to see what the commotion was about.
I can't advance unless I do this,
said Bingwen. Pipo bit her bottom lip a moment, then held Nero tighter.
Do it quickly,
she said. Bingwen set the device aside.
What hurts worse, Nero? When I press down on your belly, or when I release?
He didn't need to wait for an answer. Nero cried out when Bingwen released the pressure. Bingwen checked the appropriate box and placed the device over the stomach.
Now hold still. It's going to take a series of images. This part won't hurt at all.
Tears had welled up in the little boy's eyes, and Pipo looked on the verge of crying as well. Several adults had heard Nero cry out, and a crowd was slowly gathering around the bed. When the results came in, the device said it was 97.5% confident of the diagnosis.
His appendix is about to burst,
said Bingwen. Pipo's eyes widened.
Burst? What does that mean? It means we need to find a surgeon immediately. They need to remove it.
Pipo sprinted to retrieve Mamagoshi, and the old woman arrived a moment later, puffing and irritated at being disturbed. She scowled and gestured at the gathering crowd.
What's all this? Nero's stomach is going to burst,
said one of the boys.
His appendix,
said Bingwen. He showed Mamagoshi the device. He could tell from her expression that she couldn't read English or understand the scans she was looking at. But she did seem to understand Nero's moaning and the worry on the faces of the gathered adults. Mamagoshi unclipped her communicator from her hip and called the doctor. She tried explaining the issue, but she couldn't answer the doctor's questions or properly pronounce the terms Bingwen kept feeding her. Finally, she gave up and thrust the communicator into Bingwen's hands.
You tell her.
Bingwen read to the doctor the full diagnosis. Acute pain localized to the right iliac fossa, elevated white blood count, rebound tenderness and guarding in the right lower quadrant of the abdomen. He shared the numbers for hemoglobin, hematocrit, blood sugar. He described the results of the ultrasound and CT scans, which had identified an inflamed appendix with pus, fibrin, and congested blood vessels on the surface. Bingwen didn't know many of the English words, and thus what their Chinese equivalent would be, so he simply pronounced them in English and hoped the doctor understood. When he finished, the doctor said,
How old are you? 8. But I don't understand most of what I'm telling you. All I know for certain is that Nero needs surgery immediately. Can you come? Yes, I'll send someone to get him right away. You did good.
2 soldiers arrived minutes later with a gurney and took Nero away. Pipo insisted on going with him, but the soldiers wouldn't allow it. When they were gone, the crowd dispersed. Bingwen could see the adults whispering to each other, passing the news. Pipo stared at the exit where Nero had gone, and Bingwen tried to reassure her.
The doctor sounded kind. When I told her it was appendicitis, she didn't seem nervous. I'm guessing she's done that surgery many times before.
Pipo turned to him, and for an instant he saw the girl she had been before the war, small and afraid and delicate. Mamagoshi asked to see the Medicist device again.
Where did you get this? From a soldier,
Bingwen told her. He didn't want to tell her it was Mazer's and that Mazer was somewhere in the facility. He worried she might try to return it to him. She gave it back to him and said,
Come with me.
Bingwen followed her to the nurse's station, where a boy lay on a cot.
He says his ears and jaw hurt, said Mamagoshi. Can your doctor pad tell us why?
Bingwen looked at the boy, and the 2 nurses seated around his cot regarded Bingwen curiously. They were not real nurses, Bingwen saw. They were mothers and grandmothers from farming villages, simple people doing as best as they knew how, which medically wasn't much. Bingwen set up the device and followed the instructions. Soon the device asked that he attach an otoscope head to the camera lens. It showed him a picture of one, and he asked the nurses if there was such a thing in the medical supplies. One of them left and returned with a few options. Bingwen attached one as best as he could and continued. The boy had a severe inner ear infection, and the medicist recommended the appropriate doses of antibiotics and pain medicine. Mamagoshi had him scan other people next. A woman had a ruptured disc in her neck. A man had a sinus infection. A crying baby had acid reflux. A pregnant woman wanted to know the sex of her unborn child. Some of the people he could help. Others he couldn't. Sometimes they had ailments the device couldn't identify. Further lab work required, it would say, or additional tests needed, or please see a doctor for further assistance. Other times, it simply prescribed medicine that the facility didn't have. Word of the failures didn't spread nearly as quickly as the successes, however, and soon people from Fang, Fire, and Wings were coming for a diagnosis, forming a line that stretched down the tunnel. Bingwen pulled Mamagoshi aside.
What you're having me do is rather dangerous, he said. I'm not a doctor. The device is for emergencies in the field, when a real doctor is inaccessible. It's a last resort option. It can be wrong. These people need a real doctor. We don't have enough, said Mamagoshi. Then we need to get some, said Bingwen. Can you take me outside the facility? Why? The medicist can't get a SAT connection this far underground, and I know someone who can help.
She announced to those waiting in line that they were taking a break. Then she took him up a service elevator to the garage. Bingwen had retrieved his radiation suit, and he slipped it on once they reached the main door. 2 soldiers guarding the exit stopped them when they approached.
He needs a moment outside,
Mamagoshi told them. The men looked at each other, shrugged, and let Bingwen out. Knock twice to be let back in, said one of them. And don't let the Formix eat you, said the other. They closed the door behind him. It was night out. Bingwen walked a short distance away until he got a strong signal. He checked the time. New Zealand was 4 hours ahead. It was the middle of the night there, closer to dawn. She had told him to call at any hour, however. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice groggy.
This is Kim. It's Bingwen,
he said.
The boy from China. I'm sorry to wake you.
She was instantly alert.
Bingwen, I've been so worried. Are you safe? Where are you?
He hardly knew her. He had never even seen her face. She had helped him perform the surgery on Mazer, and he had learned afterward that she and Mazer had been... what? Not husband and wife yet, but whatever came before that. A couple? And yet, despite this brief, tenuous connection she and Bingwen had shared, he felt as if he did know her, that she was someone special to him. A friend, yes. And maybe even more than that. Not a mother, no. But like a mother. A half-mother. A woman who knew him and valued him and worried over him. He would never say as much to her, of course, and he had never even thought such a thing prior to this moment. But it felt so wonderful to be fretted over, thought about, remembered, that he found himself smiling.
I'm safe,
he said. He told her everything then, all of it spilling out of him. About the base, the conditions, Mamagoshi and Pippo and Nero and Hun, the 14-year-old driver. He told her about the cocky Lieutenant Lee and the sick people in Claw and Fire and the other barracks. He wasn't sure why he was divulging every detail, but it felt like such a release to talk to someone. Mazer was fine, by the way, he told her. He had healed. He was healthy. He could run and move. It was as if he had never been hurt. She broke down at that point. At first, Bingwen didn't realize she was crying. There was only silence on her end, and for a moment he thought he had lost the connection.
Dr. Arnsbrock?
He said.
I'm here,
she said, her voice shaky. He felt like an idiot then. Mazer was her first concern. He had lost the connection with her shortly after Mazer's surgery when the device's battery had depleted, and Kim had not yet heard how Mazer had recovered. She had been sick with worry all this time, and Bingwen had just yammered on and on about trivial things when it was Mazer she wanted to know about. When she collected herself, she apologized and blamed her emotions on the lack of sleep, and told him more than once that under no circumstances was he to tell Mazer that she had cried. Promise me, Bingwen. He promised. She asked him where Mazer was now.
He's here at this underground facility. He's helping to lead the soldiers from here. It's some big operation. I don't think they're sending him out to fight. I think he'll stay here where it's safe.
The line went quiet again.
Are you still there?
He asked. She sniffed.
Yes. I'm just... relieved.
Bingwen was suddenly angry.
He should have called you and told you all this himself. It's complicated, Bingwen. No, it isn't. It's good manners.
She laughed.
Oh, Bingwen. I hope you and I can meet in person someday.
He remembered why he had called.
I need your help. We need doctors. There are thousands of people here and hardly any medical staff. I know you can't send doctors. This is a war zone. The skies aren't safe. But would you or any doctors you know be willing to see patients via the nets, through hollows? You can't treat them, obviously. At best, you could partially examine them and diagnose them. People here could conduct whatever tests you needed, assuming we have the equipment for it. We'd be your hands. None of us have any medical training, so we wouldn't conduct any procedures or surgeries if they were needed. We would leave that to the real doctors here. That would be their focus. Instead of spending time examining patients, they could dedicate all their time to performing procedures only they can do. So we identify the emergencies, they address them. More people could be seen that way, and we could hopefully avoid what almost happened with Nero.
When she spoke again, the worry in her voice was gone, replaced with steel-hard confidence.
Bingwen, I'm going to my office right now. There are several nonprofits that do this sort of thing. I'll get our people on it immediately. What's a nonprofit? A charity. A group of people who help for free. In this case, doctors. There are some charities in the US, Europe, South America, 2 in Africa. Give me a few hours to contact them. We can probably find several who speak Chinese. In the meantime, we need equipment for the transmissions and numbers for the uplinks. I've seen some holo equipment here on site,
said Bingwen.
I'll work on that. Should I speak to someone in charge?
Asked Kim.
A commanding officer. Get the military's help. I don't even know who that is. I'll ask around. If we can't find out who to ask, I say we do it without permission and ask for forgiveness later.
He could hear the smile in her voice.
Bucking authority for the good of the people? I think Mazer is starting to rub off on you, Bingwen.
Bingwen beamed. It was the greatest compliment anyone had ever given him.
Chapter 15. Reunion. From Woohoo Outpost 784 at woohooindustries.net to lem.jukes at jukelimited.net. Ray El Cavador. Reina Delgado and others from El Cavador are no longer here. They left almost 2 months ago aboard a salvage ship named Gagak, captained by a Somali named Aryuna. Sorry, no additional information. The message was projected on the wall screen in Lem Juke's office, and Victor read it a second time as a mix of emotions welled up inside him. Mother? On a salvage ship? Victor couldn't imagine it. Why would she get on a salvage ship? And with a Somali, no less. If she got on a ship, I'm sure she had a good reason, said Imala. She and Lem were standing behind him. They had all seen the message. Victor turned to face her. You don't know Somalis, Imala. They're vultures, pirates. They strip derelict ships to the bone, sometimes with the crew still inside them. They don't care. They rape, kill, and then they'll rob you. That can't be who these Somalis are, said Imala. It says she left on a salvage ship. If she had been abducted, the message would have said so. I take this to mean she went voluntarily. Imala's right, said Lem. If this Gagak were a crew of vultures, they never would have reached the outpost. The Woohoo defenses would have pulverized them before they got within 10 clicks of the place. Victor glowered. What do you know about it? Plenty. Woohoo is a competitor. We know their operations inside and out. Those outposts are fortresses. They're engineered to fend off pirates. And speaking of which, not all Somalis are pirates. There are crow crews as well. They'll live by salvage law. They hate vultures as much as anyone. Maybe even more so because vultures give Somalis such a bad rep. It doesn't make sense, said Victor. Why would they leave? They would have been safer at an outpost. Apparently your mother didn't think so, said Imala. If she left, she had reasons. She had women and children with her. Maybe these Somalis offered them passage somewhere. Yes, but where? My mother and aunts have nowhere to go. We have the name of the ship, said Lem. We'll find it and contact it directly. They're a salvage ship, said Victor. They're not going to have an account with Luna. They won't likely be in the network. We may not be able to reach them until they dock somewhere. That could be months from now. And if they do their trade off the market, as most salvage crews do, they won't register when they dock, which means we may never find them. Leave that to me, said Lem. By late the following day, Lem had located them. He approached Victor in the warehouse and handed him the coordinates on a portable data screen. They're near an asteroid called Themis, in the outer rim of the belt. Victor flipped up his welding visor and stared at the data screen. But how did you find them? Black magic. You'll also be happy to know they're on the network. And since we know they're near Themis, we know their relay route. There are probably 12 to 20 stations between them and us, so at best it'll take several hours to get a response, and that's assuming all the switchboards are operational and the laser line gets through clean. But hey, it doesn't hurt to try. Victor looked down at the data screen and then back up at Lem, feeling sheepish. I can't afford to send a message through that many relays. I have some money that my family gave me, but it's probably not enough. I'll cover the expense, said Lem, whatever it is and for however long you talk. I owe you that much. Thank you. They found an empty office in the warehouse, filled mostly with boxes of junk and broken equipment. Lem cleared the desk with his arm, knocking most of the items onto the floor and kicking up a cloud of dust. Then he set down the terminal and made a sweeping gesture with his hand. It's not a luxury suite, but it's private at least. And maybe the only quiet place in the warehouse. I won't tell anyone where you are. I set up a laser line account in your name. It's there on screen. Take your time. Lem began to leave. Why do this? Asked Victor. Why help me? Lem paused at the door. I'm not a monster, Victor. I know I may appear that way to you after everything I've done, but I'm trying to make things right here. Besides, I have a mother too, you know. Here on Luna? No, home, in Finland. Are you close? Lem laughed sadly. I haven't spoken to her since I was 5 years old. She abandoned me and my father. She's a despicable person. I can't stand the thought of her, but I see what you feel for your mother, and I envy that. He walked out and closed the door behind him. Victor shook out the contents of a crate, turned it over to use as a seat, sat down in front of the terminal and began to type.
Just outside the women's restroom on the Gagak, Rena Delgado rubbed her eyes with her thumb and index finger and tried to stay calm. Julexi and Sabad had ambushed her in the corridor as Rena had left the restroom, and now she was getting an earful. "We're not engineers, Rena," said Julexi. "We can fix things here and there, but we can't turn this ship into a digger. It's ludicrous." The restroom was at the end of the corridor, so Rena had a wall behind her. She couldn't retreat that way. Julexi and Sabad had her boxed in. The two women made an unlikely pair. Julexi had lost her husband Pitoso on El Cavador, and she had argued and questioned every one of Rena's proposals and decisions ever since. Sabad, Arjuna's youngest wife, despised everyone from El Cavador. How these women had formed an alliance, Rena could only guess. What was the saying? The enemy of my enemy is my friend? "Your stay here was intended to be temporary, Rena," said Sabad. "Arjuna, in his kindness, took you in for a time because he pitied you. It was not an invitation to alter our entire operations. What gives you the right to come onto our ship and tell us we're doing everything wrong? Do you think yourself so much better than us?" "Arjuna took us in because he needed laborers," Rena wanted to say, "which is what we've been doing since we got here. Working our fingers to the bone, which is more than I say for you, Sabad, whose only occupation seems to be whining, backbiting, and flirting with the other men on your husband's ship." But aloud, Rena said, No one is implying that your operations are flawed, Sabad. Then what are you implying? That our work is beneath you? That the salvage trade is for a lower class? Is that what we are to you, Lady of El Cavador? A lower class? Because we are Somali? Rena sighed inside. Why did Arjuna persist in calling her Lady of El Cavador? Didn't he see that it angered Sabad? Of course he saw, thought Rena. That was probably the reason why he was doing it. To annoy her, a way of publicly poking her with a stick. Everyone saw how Sabad would move around the ship half naked, lingering in the engine rooms where the men would ogle at her healthy breasts. It wasn't uncommon for the Somali women to go bare-chested, but Sabad put hers on parade, twisting her hips as she moved through the room, so her breasts would sway back and forth in zero gravity like an invitation. Arjuna had told her to cover herself on more than one occasion, but Sabad had merely found ways to avoid him. Is that what you're doing, Arjuna? Rena wondered. Annoying your wife through me? There is no caste system on this ship, said Rena. There are two tribes, ours and yours. We are equals. We are not equals, said Sabad. This is our ship. You are guests here. We have formed a partnership, said Rena. Making the Gagak a mining ship is Arjuna's wish as well. It is a false partnership, said Sabad. You cannot form an alliance without a male leader among you. Our male leader is on Luna, Rena said, although in truth she wasn't sure if that was accurate. Once the ship had logged into the network, Rena had trolled through the news feeds until she had found Victor's name. It hadn't been difficult. When the invasion began, several news outlets had recalled the video a young free miner named Victor Delgado had uploaded onto the nets and that everyone had dismissed as phony. Rena had done some additional digging and learned that Victor had been arrested by the Lunar Trade Department for various ridiculous charges involving his flight into Luna. He had escaped custody, however, and that's where the trail ended. Maybe he was on Luna, maybe he wasn't. Maybe he had gone to Earth. Maybe he had tried to return to the K-Belt. Maybe he was trying to find El Cavador. She wished she knew. But for the moment, what she did know was enough. He was alive. He had made it to Luna. He had done the impossible. It struck her as ironic that he had made such a sacrifice only to have the world reject him. All that way, all that suffering, and what does Earth do? How do they thank him? By throwing him into prison. It was a wonder more families hadn't fled the insanity of Earth and taken up the mining trade. If your son is on Luna, why doesn't he talk to us? Said Sabad. How do we know this alliance is his wish? Are we to take your word on it? Our Council of Women met and voted on the matter, said Rena. Victor is our chief in absentia. The council makes decisions in his absence. First off, said Julexi, Victor is not our chief. I don't care if he's the oldest male or not. That doesn't make him our leader in our culture. Second, the council's vote is meaningless. We're not a true council. We haven't been a true council since the incident. She meant the destruction of El Cavador and the death of all the men. That's the name Julexi had given it. The incident. Rena found the word offensive. It sounded so insignificant. Uncle Jorge having too much to drink at a birthday party. That was an incident. Victor as an infant peeing into the air during his baptism and unleashing droplets of urine throughout the cargo bay. That was an incident. But the death of half of their crew, the shattering of their livelihood, the orphaning of their children, the widowing of the wives, the ripping in half of their families was not an incident. It was far more than that. Our true council included our husbands, Rena, said Julexi. Sensible men. And if they were here, they would laugh this idea of yours to scorn.
It never would have been put to a vote. The group you call the Council now is a grieving pack of terrified widows who will jump at the chance at any return to normalcy. What's that you say? A mining ship? Just like El Cavador? Why, yes, let's do that, even though they have no idea how to actually pull it off. Our women are making intelligent, informed decisions, Julexi. We discussed the challenges in detail. We debated the issue 5 times. Everyone's voice was heard, including yours. This was not an emotional decision. It was a financial one. We are much more likely to achieve the independence we want if we make this move. I honestly think it's in our best interest as women and in the best interest of our children. Julexi threw her hand up in exasperation. That's what you always say. It's in the best interest of our children. She pointed in the direction of the cargo hold. None of those little ones are your children, Rena. Not one. They are ours. So I don't see why you think you have the right to speak on their behalf. Rena forced herself to smile and keep her voice calm. Forgive me, Julexi. I misspoke. I say our because that's what I've always said, ever since Victor was born. But you have kindly reminded me that my inability to have more children after Victor removes my right to use that possessive pronoun once Victor is gone. I assure you, hereafter, I will say your. Julexi folded her arms. Now you're being snide. No, Julexi. I'm apologizing. Whether you accept it or not is your decision. As for the Council, nothing would make me happier than to have Pitoso and Segundo and the others back among us. But that's not going to happen. As much as we want it to, it's not. That leaves us with 2 options. We can be paralyzed by our husband's absence and make no decisions whatsoever and float through the rest of our existence. Or we can adapt to this and still function as a family and take control of where we're going. I prefer the latter option, and I strongly suspect that our husbands would prefer that too. Julexi burst into tears. Rena had to bite her tongue. This is what Julexi always did when her arguments fell apart. The moment she realized that logic was against her, she resorted to her one defense mechanism: tears. She knew, of course, that this would silence any argument. All she had to do was open the floodgates, and suddenly anyone who held a contradictory position now found themselves taking Julexi into their arms and whispering words of comfort. Rena had fallen for it the first few times Julexi had done it, especially shortly after losing the men. When any one of them would cry, Rena would swoop in and embrace them and hold them close. She felt like crying herself, and mourning together was one way to cope. But Julexi had turned it into an art, probably without even realizing she was doing it. Her tears weren't fake, after all. As far as she was concerned, they were as real and warranted as all others. To suggest otherwise would be an offense. "I'm sorry this is difficult for you, Julexi," said Rena. "And I'm sorry, Sabad, if you disagree with the decision Arjuna has made. I suggest you take it up with him. Now, if you'll excuse me." She wedged her way between them and launched up the corridor. But over the course of the day, as she worked in the helm with the navigators, Rena couldn't help but wonder if Julexi was right. Could they really do this? Repairing a broken heat coupler was one thing. Installing a mining drill onto a salvage ship was quite another. None of the women had ever attempted such a thing. Segundo and Victor over the years had done all that. Could Rena? Was she honestly capable of installing a lug processor, for example? Could she calibrate a digging stabilizer? And was the Gagak even structurally sound enough to house the needed equipment? What if it wasn't? When would they find that out?
On their first official dig, as the ship ruptures and breaks apart from the vibrations? Oh, Segundo, she thought, am I doing the right thing? Is this truly what's best? Am I helping or hurting? You could probably look at this ship and know in an instant if such a thing was possible. I am lost without you, mi amor. Lost. Sometimes I feel confident about what we're doing, but most times I want to simply fly away and be alone. How I wish you were here, mi vida, helping me, guiding me, holding me. She imagined what it would be like if Segundo were here. He and Arjuna would likely be close friends. They were of a similar temperament. She could see the two of them laughing together, and at the end of the day, Segundo and Rena would go back to their cabin. And yes, they would have their own cabin. And the two of them would laugh at how foolish Sabad was being. And Segundo would sashay around the room and shake his chest the way Sabad did. And Rena would laugh and slap him playfully on the arm and tell him he was being mean. Rena? Rena looked up from the hollow screen she had been staring at. Edimar, her niece, was floating beside her. 15 years old now, and looking more like Lola, her mother, every day. Edimar had been a close friend to Victor. She had been the one to first spot the Formic ship approaching the system using the ship's motion detection telescope known as the Eye. Edimar had always been a little girl in Rena's mind, isolated up there in the eye of El Cavador, watching for collision threats and keeping them all safe. But she was hardly a little girl now. The last year had seen a growth spurt. She was nearly a woman grown, tall, full-chested, slender in the arms and legs. Not old enough to marry, of course, but old enough to give boys heart palpitations. It had happened once on the Gagak. One of the Somali boys her age had whistled at her, and Rena had quickly gone to Arjuna to put an end to it. Rena smiled. Mar, I'm sorry. I didn't see you there. Can I speak to you for a moment? Of course. They left the helm and went to the bay window at the bow of the ship. The immensity of space was before them. It was not a real window, of course, merely a projection from the cameras outside. But it looked real, and it must have reminded Edimar of the Eye, because Rena always found her here, floating at the window, staring outward as if looking for something lost. Perhaps her sister Alejandra, Rena thought, or her father, Toron. Edimar said, I need you to ask Arjuna something for me. Okay. I know I can technically go to him myself. He said as much. Anyone on board can approach him, but I'd rather you do it. All right. Now that we're on network, I want to get on the parallax system. Rena furrowed her brow. Should I know what that is? It's a group of telescopes orbiting the system. Juke set them up years ago. With them, scientists can look way out into deep space. Why have I never heard of this? Because they're for academics, researchers. We had no use for that kind of data on El Cavador. We were focused on finding nearby asteroids, not on looking into deep space. And besides, we weren't on the network. It wasn't available to us anyway. Why do you want to get on parallax? When I saw the Formic ship coming into the system, it was only a few weeks away at that point. But if I had had a stronger scope, and if I'd known precisely where to look, I might have seen it long before then. What are you saying? Asked Rena. You think that parallax satellites may have seen the Formic ship before we did? I think it's possible, yes. But I won't know unless I look at the database from the past 2 to 3 years or so. But if the parallax scopes had seen the Formic ship, wouldn't they have warned everyone? Remember, these scopes are computers. They only do what we program them to do. Nobody has their eye to a lens analyzing every little odd thing the scope sees. That would take too long. And it would be an enormous waste of time anyway. Most of the objects out there are harmless. All astronomers are worried about are collision threats. So they program the scopes to flag only those light reflection objects that pose a threat to Earth. Everything else gets ignored. Essentially, if it's not on a trajectory with Earth, if it's not following normal parabolic patterns, nobody cares.
Okay, makes sense.
It makes sense, yes, but there's a gaping hole in that practice. It doesn't account for anomalies, like when an object decelerates or when it changes from one trajectory to another. The scopes should flag those type of objects too, but they don't.
Why not?
Because no one thought it was possible. Objects that behave that way are clearly extraterrestrial, and astronomers gave up on looking for extraterrestrial life way back in the 20th century. Research in that field became unfashionable. Academics would have been laughed to scorn if they had suggested the scopes look for such things.
Well, they're kicking themselves now, said Rena.
My point is, it's very possible that the scopes saw the Formic ship earlier without flagging it for analysis. And if something doesn't get flagged, it might as well not exist. It goes unseen and unnoticed in the archives.
Yes, but wouldn't astronomers be sifting through that data now?
You would think, said Edimar, but no one is. I went on the system and checked.
Wait, you've already been on the system?
As a guest, said Edimar. I did what any college kid can do. You can log on and see what the current objects for analysis are. But that's it. You can't access the archives, and that's where the answers are.
So, you need deeper access. Is there a fee involved?
Well, yes, but I'm not proposing we pay it. We couldn't afford it, and they wouldn't approve us anyway. We're not a university.
Then, how do you get access?
I set up a bogus username, and I piggyback on a university's current account. It wouldn't be that difficult, and it's not like anyone polices the system. Why would they? It's research, not a bank.
But it's illegal.
Technically. And that's why I need Arjuna to approve this before I do it. There are people on this ship looking for any reason to make us leave, and I don't want to be the person to give them a reason.
Rena smiled. Edimar, so young, and yet so wise. She took Edimar's hands. You're growing up too fast, Mar. Your father would be proud of you. I know I am.
So you'll talk to Arjuna?
I'll talk to him. And he'll say yes.
Edimar looked out the window a moment. When she turned back, Rena saw that there were tears in the girl's eyes. This will never be home, Aunt Rena. No matter what we do to this ship, no matter how much we modify or equip it, it will never be home.
Rena felt as if her heart would break in two. She gently squeezed Edimar's hands. You're not wrong, Mar. Home was El Cavador. Home was Segundo and your father and Alejandra and everything the way it was. And no matter what we do here, no matter what changes we make, we can never have that home again. She reached out and put a hand on Edimar's cheek. But that doesn't mean we can't be happy, Mar. It may not be the happiness we had before. It may feel like a lesser version of it for a time. We may not even feel it some days at all. But we have to believe more will come. We have to hope. You've suffered more than most, Mar, and I wish I could fix that. But I can't. All I can do is be with you and your mother and the others and try to make something new. Maybe not a home. Maybe that won't come until later. But I believe it will come, Mar. With your brains in this operation, how could it not?
Edimar smiled, and the two of them embraced. A voice shouted from down the corridor, "Miss Rena!" Rena turned and looked. One of the crewmen from the helm, Magashi, was calling to her. "You better come to the helm quick, lady." "What's wrong?" "You have a message," said Magashi. "Arjuna said to bring you at once." "From the traders?" No, lady. From your son." From helmcoms at gagak481.net to vico.delgado at jukelimited.net. Found at last. Dearest Vico, my son, I have read your letter 5 times now. Every time I do, I cry. You would have been proud of me. I have held back tears for a long time now. I have tried to be strong. But to know that your fingers actually typed the words I was reading, to know that you are alive and safe, I became a slobbery mess. It's only a matter of time before the crew here starts calling me Nose Faucet or something worse. Somalis love nicknames. Edimar was with me when your letter came. She sends her love. You wouldn't recognize her if you saw her. She's grown so much. All of the women and children are here as well. I have read them your letter. If I were to include all the messages they asked me to pass along on their behalf, this would take forever to type. Suffice it to say, you're loved and missed. In fact, this might be a good time to inform you that you're the chief of our tribe. It's a long story, but essentially, we need you to approve our partnering with Arjuna and his crew to turn the Gagak into a mining vessel. I've convinced myself that being the wife and mother of 2 brilliant mechanics qualifies me to lead this effort. So far, no one has put me in a padded room. Should I self-commit? In your letter, you ask about Mono. It breaks my heart to tell you that he snuck back onto El Cavador before the Woohoo ship had decoupled. I'm so sorry, son. He was on El Cavador when it was lost. I wish I could be there with you to give you this news. It seems so cold and impersonal to do it this way. I know he was like a brother to you. I hope you find some comfort in knowing that you were always in his thoughts. From the moment you left, you were always the subject of conversation if Mono was around. Vico this and Vico that. His love for you was as pure as any little boy's can be. Remember him, son, and let his love for you make you stronger. I'm sorry you learned about your father from Leauge. That angered me more than you know. When I see you next, I will tell you all, and we can grieve together. In the meantime, to answer your question, I am fine. Losing your father was like losing myself, but I am holding tight to memories and finding peace wherever I can. You mentioned that you plan to attack the Formic ship with a team of soldiers. Don't. I know it's cruel and selfish of me to ask such a thing, but I am going to be cruel and selfish. The thought of losing you so soon after finding you is almost unbearable. Build whatever they need. Design whatever the mission requires. Give them every scrap of brilliance that brain of yours can produce. But don't give them you. You need to experience life, Vico. There is so much you haven't lived. Fall in love. Be loved by someone in return. Have children, as many as your future wife can give you. Love them. Grow old with them. That is a joy you have not yet experienced, and it is the greatest joy of this life. Maybe it's this Imala girl. I like her spunk. You don't mention her age, But if she's working and out of college, she's got a few years on you. So what? I was 4 years older than your father, as you know, and he wouldn't have had it any other way. Stay alive, son. That's all I ask. From the moment you've left, I've kept you close, and that's where you will always be. All my love. Mom.
Chapter 16. Holopad. Bingwin set up the doctor's clinic in an alcove on the lower level of Dragon's Den. Kim had come through with so many doctors willing to help staff the clinic via Holo that Bingwin could have opened a small hospital